All right. Karibu, this is the Swahili word for welcome. So I just want to extend a welcome to everybody, a warm, warm welcome on this Wednesday afternoon. Um, we're just gonna go ahead and dive right in. Let's talk through what we're gonna go through today. So first, we're gonna talk about the challenges facing small and underserved landowners. We'll hear from an heirs property expert on heirs property and how that interplays with um, forest management. Then we'll talk about an overview of the Family Forest Carbon Program and also some of the ways that the Family Forest Carbon Program is seeking to address some of the challenges that we'll have talked about earlier on in the presentation. We'll hear firsthand from an enrolled landowner and have an opportunity to hear their experience, and then we'll open it up for Q&A from the audience. So that's kind of the run of show for the day. And I just want to say that one of the reasons why we wanted to do this presentation is really to show the need for support of the work that we're trying to do. It's critically important work, and there's always sort of a need to have more resources to support family forest owners. And so the goal is that people will kind of learn about the ways that this work is sort of mission critical to what we're trying to do with the Family Forest Carbon Program, and want to support this work. In this time, we're dealing with situations where federal funding is not quite as plentiful as it has been in the past for some of the work with small landowners and sort of climate and underserved work. Um, so it becomes even more important to have that philanthropic support from private sources. All right, so before we dive in, I want to give a introduction of the speakers that you're going to hear from today. So I'm going to be first up. My name is Tatiana Height, but I go by Tots for short, so please do call me Tots. I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the Family First Carbon Program. I've been here for 4 years, first as our Southern Director, and now Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So I work to make the program more accessible for various different landowners. My background is in urban planning and environmental justice. We have Mavis Gragg on the call. Mavis is a seasoned attorney, conservation professional, and co-founder of AirShares, which we're very excited to have a ongoing partnership with AirShares, who has nearly 2 decades of experience in real estate, conflict resolution, estate planning, and probate. And then we will hear from a landowner, Don Radcliffe, who is a retired pharmacist and also a currently enrolled landowner in the Family Forest Carbon Program, who has joined a special pilot project for what we call our extra small landowners. And he has firsthand insight to share with us into the challenges that come with forest ownership and management, and what current practices that he's doing to support forest management on his property. So we're very excited to have us convening to talk about these things. All right, so challenges. And forgive me, I'm keeping myself on task here with some handwritten notes. I love good handwritten notes. But it's gonna fall into these three categories. So like I said, I first started with the American Forest Foundation as our Southern Director. And that was in 2021 with the goal of bringing the Family Forest Carbon Program to the South. And with the focus on expanding our program into the South, I was constantly out in the community, talking to landowners, hearing from landowners about their experiences, and trying to figure out what we were going to need to do in order to really be successful in making sure that our program was meeting the needs of Southern landowners. And through that, there were many different sort of things that landowners would bring up as it related to different experiences that they were having or different barriers that they may have had. And so I've sort of compiled those into these three different areas. So the first big area is land tenure. What do I mean by that? Holding and controlling land. Hearing from landowners about one, being able to support the property taxes on the land, which for some landowners, depending on what area you're in, could be pretty hefty. Some landowners might be not living on their land, living in another state. They may have inherited their land from somewhere, and so just trying to make sure to keep up with those costs of just owning the land. Um, is one of the things that I've heard as a potential challenge. Secondly, thinking about just land ownership, which we'll hear about how heirs property interplays with land ownership and how that could be a challenge for landowners more so from Mavis. So I won't dive into that, even though it's one of the big things that I constantly was hearing from landowners as a potential challenge to them for accessing different programs. Secondly, is land acquisition. So just being able to acquire land if you are wanting to be a forest landowner, getting a hold of that land and then actually keeping it. And then lastly, management. So having the resources, the tools and the knowledge to know how to then manage the resource once you do have it, or if you are trying to keep it or maintain it. If you inherited it from somebody who was doing all the management and then trying to know how to properly steward that land when it comes into your ownership. The second thing is program access. So the big thing, our program is a carbon program. So thinking about just being able to access voluntary carbon market programs. In the past, prior to our program, you really had to have large land holdings, so 2,500 plus acres, which meant that mostly corporate landowners were those who were participating in carbon programs, not small family forest owners. So our program was really innovative in making sure that small family forest owners had access to voluntary carbon markets as well as um, uh, well, I'm losing my train of thought. Then we have federal programs. So we've seen in this day and age, federal programs not being as plentiful for landowners to be able to participate in, and not necessarily seeing as many resources flowing from those. So that as a potential income stream is just not flowing as much as it may have in the past. Next, bill size, and so just thinking about making sure that landowners do have enough land to be able to, for it to make sense for them economically to participate in different programs, or to be able to do different management, given the amount of land that they have. Um, then just having knowledge. So you need to know about the programs. You need to know how you can access them, knowing what sort of paperwork or any kind of onus like that, who to go to get information, how to walk through the process. That is a big barrier to landowners. Then having different program availability. Oftentimes, landowners might be interested in various different programs, and it might not be something that they have access to in their particular state or their particular county. And then lastly, I heard a lot of landowners talking about tree type. So if there is a program available, is it available for the kind of forest that I have? Thinking about hardwood versus softwood. And then lastly, forest market participation. So when I say that, I mean making sure that the landowner has a working forest. So a forest that's actually bringing in income for them, as opposed to more so just sort of existing for recreational purposes or just enjoyment or something like that. But being actually able to make money from the land. Again, if you have a small property, um, it kind of limits the amount of money that you're going to be able to make from it. The more land you have, more potential opportunities for revenue, but also thinking about operators. And for those small landowners, operators might not be willing to come out and do a harvest or something like that for them to even be able to access timber markets. Also thinking about mill closures. If they don't have a mill close to them, again, not being able to have access, or if there previously was one and then it shuts down, that limits their ability to access those forest markets. Mavis will talk more about forest management plans in her section and how that kind of interplays with her suggestions that she has. And then also forest quality. Hearing from a lot of underserved landowners, the healthier your forest is and the more higher trees that you have, higher quality trees that you have, the more money then you're able to make from them if you do a harvest and what kind of products they're able to produce from those trees. So landowners who haven't been able to invest in that forest management and don't have those healthy woodlands, then might not be able to access management that would allow them to make products that they would get more money for. So that's another big barrier for small and underserved landowners. So I'll hand it over to Mavis now to dive deep on the heirs property aspect of it.
Greetings, everyone. I'm in chilly but beautiful Vermont. Normally, I'm in North Carolina, but it's exciting to be here in the virtual space with all of you. AirShares is a legal tech company that's taking a very old foundational area of law and creating new ways to disrupt it. And I'll share more about that in a minute. But next slide. Tots did share about my background. I do want to point out that I have been practicing for nearly 20 years, and most of my work has been focused on death and dirt, so estate planning, succession planning, and real estate. However, it was actually entering into the forestry space that really opened up the impact of this work because um, many families have complex legal issues related to their ownership model and they need incentives, they need support. And so it's been a pretty remarkable experience to see how forestry has played a role in transitioning the norm for families who own real estate in this way. And I'm not just saying that because I used to work at AFF. I'm saying it because I truly do see how being able to get support both with forest management and stewardship as well as the legal part has been a pretty great way of driving impact for landowners. So needless to say, I have been in the green space now since 2015 and have been able to learn a lot and also do some cross-cutting solutions on these issues. Next slide. We're going to go to law school for a little bit, but I do want to um, get us on the same level of understanding about what heirs property is. Heirs property simply is real estate that is maintained by families across generations, and the ownership succession model is through inheritance. And so it is a means of inherited family land is a means of family wealth preservation. When I think of wealth, I think of wealth pretty dynamically. Wealth could be financial, but it could also be abundance of natural resources. It could be, something that's of critical value to the families only. But the legal structure of heirs property actually creates a lot of vulnerabilities, which we'll discuss, that contribute to loss, but also they contribute to loss in value from a natural resources perspective. A lot of families own a lot of family forest owners own real estate, their forest in this way. And we see a lot of risks for loss, but also for conversion and under management. And so there have been a lot of initiatives, of which AFF and I have been a part of, which we'll learn about later. Next slide. All right, we're in law school. So there's two ways to transfer real estate. You can transfer it with a deed, which is a legal document. It's recorded. If any of us on here own real estate, we know what a deed is and the importance of having that recorded. It puts the world on notice. But any of us who own real estate, when we pass away, that the foundational laws in each of our states actually create a mechanism for ownership succession, and that's called inheritance. And it doesn't matter if it's inheritance through a will or just simply intestate succession. But when property is transferred through inheritance, it does create some kind of interesting things. So if we look at the next slide, this is a typical family tree. At the top, we have two family members who were married. They had four kids. It's illustrated in black. They got married, grandkids, etc. The family grew. And if we think about ownership succession within the same family, where it goes from within the married couple, when the first spouse passes away to the surviving spouse, but then it goes out to the children, not only are the bundle of rights changing, but the number of owners are changing and they're actually growing. And I don't know how many of you have siblings and cousins and aunts and uncles, but I know with my family, co-owning real estate has been very challenging. If we looking at this particular family, imagining that, they had a small parcel, 40 acres, and they have been owning it, stewarding it for decades, but then fast forward to the present on the next slide, what we have is We went from 2 owners to 1 to 4, and now 16 owners. And they have various interest size because not only are they passing to heirs, when there's multiple heirs for a single interest, then that interest is divided. And so then you have lots of fractional interests of different sizes. Next slide. A lot of times when we hear about heirs property, there's this message around using wills. Most people with wills who have real estate, they create heirs property. So it's not a matter of not having a will. It is simply a strategic decision. It's transferring property to multiple people. And in North Carolina, as this chart shows you, it can go to people you wouldn't expect. Your real estate could go to people you wouldn't expect. But I don't think that's the biggest point in this discussion. I just wanted to highlight the fact that when we do rely on the state laws, it actually creates a mess from a legal perspective. Next slide. So what does that mean for programs like the Family Forest Carbon Program? When you have confirmed ownership, meaning when inherited real estate ownership has been traced by an attorney, a legal opinion has been developed, and we know who the current owners are and the ownership is stable, it allows the family to build a more strategic ownership succession in which we're using an entity-centered model like a LLC or trust. It also allows owners to participate in conservation programs and strategies like FFCP. They can access resources for stewardship more easily, disaster more easily, and also can increase the income on the property. And when they have clear title and ownership, you can just collaborate in a much better way. So basically, again, this model, ownership is changing. We have lots of new owners. They're not known because ownership is happening by virtue of people dying. It creates a legal quandary. But when we can address that legal quandary, we actually open up a lot of opportunities that are important to all of us. Next slide. And so then I turned to this notion of forest management plan. Remember, I said that I got introduced to this space about 10 years ago. And what I love about forest management plans is that they are comprehensive. They're specific to the actual piece of property, and they're developed on the landowner's management objectives with professional expertise. And it provides a roadmap to achieve the landowner's goal in a cost-effective and strategic way. When we do succession planning for ownership of real estate, family real estate, we get the same kind of benefits. We get a site-specific plan that's developed based on the owner's management objectives. We have the opportunity to bring a lot of knowledge and experience to the family that helps them think 500 years into the future. Because when you have a very solid succession plan, you can think really far in advance. And that's the kind of planning we want with our forest and other natural resources. And so I think if anything, when you take away with heirs property as it relates to stewardship and management, our ultimate goal is to get families in very comprehensive succession plans that are also supportive of their forest management plans. Next slide. There's a lot of incentives. I just pointed out one, but do know that this form of ownership spans the country in both urban and rural areas. So it's also an affordable housing issue or opportunity. Inherited real estate is naturally occurring affordable housing. There's also infrastructure sustainability. In Montana, last year, a family farm of about 100 acres was divided because the family didn't get along. It was divided by the court into 13 parcels. That's 13 small farms that the city is no longer able, or the town is no longer able to support. So there's a lot of incentives. Of course, also market supply. A few years ago, Kimberly-Clark, which is a paper products company, and World Wildlife Fund did a study on a lot of things, but looking at timber, forestry, et cetera, in Alabama and Mississippi. And in that study learned that the heirs property model of ownership is actually resulting in smaller parcels of forest because families are choosing to partition the property as a form of conflict resolution or conflict prevention. Next slide. So then if we think about the opportunities out there, but also the risks. I wanted to share a little bit about what AirShares is doing and how AFF is working with AirShares. So this map was developed by, this is my home state of North Carolina, and this map was developed by the U.S. Forest Service, which has taken a great interest in heirs property and has done a lot of work. But this map came out in 2017, so the visuals have likely changed. But what it does show is in my home state, which has a lot of forestry, a lot of forests, a lot of agriculture, traditional agriculture, a lot of biodiversity. There's also a lot of this an unstable form of real estate ownership. There's a lot of opportunity for conversion of forest and for conversion of farms. There's a lot of risks for under management. And so what AirShares is doing, my company, so I took, I grew frustrated with the legal practice, not having all the tools, and so created a tech company to build those tools. And one of those tools that we're building is data. We are developing heirs property parcel data currently across the Southeast and ultimately across the country. But what that means is that we are able to hone in on where there are concentrations of heirs property alongside other things such as forest or flooding or housing, etc. And with AFF, we're able to look at AFF's a family forest carbon program and where each of them are situated, the programs are situated, we're able to advise AFF on what their approach is with heirs property owners. Certainly, we have a lot of opportunity to get heirs property owners enrollment ready, meaning we were able to develop enough title work so that they can get confirmed ownership and then get consent to move forward. But there are other things that AFF can do that can help family forest owners be ready to participate in conservation programs such as the Family Forest Carbon Program. And I will say what AirShares is doing is highly skeptical or what's the word? Speculative. It's speculative, meaning that this very old area of law doesn't have a lot of innovation. And so it is pretty significant that we've been able to develop this very robust database that will allow more family forest owners to get clear title and to be better stewards. It is significant that we're able to do that. And I would say that's largely because we do have the support of the forestry space, both American Forest Foundation and Enviva. Enviva even started a heirs property fund because they source heavily from family forest owners. And then, as you know, AFF, that's all AFF does is work with family forest owners. So I feel really excited about the Family Forest Carbon Program because it does open up a lot more opportunities for stewardship and resources to continue with the family land. I'll stop there. I think I went over my 10 minutes, Tots, but I'm excited.
Live your best life, Mavis. Oh, there's more.
Guys, oh, we can skip that. We can come back to that. I mean, I just wanted to point, actually, I do want to go to the last slide. If you go to the last slide, I did want to point out who's in the mix just to give folks an idea. Because heirs property ownership challenges impact so many different issue areas, there's been a tremendous influx of organizations and organization types. So I would say that the forestry field led with that charge, but now we have federal entities and government-sponsored entities like the Federal Reserve Banks, the Federal Home Loan Banks. I mentioned USDA entities, a lot of CDFIs and national banks. And on the national bank ends, Wells Fargo had a fund. I think they just sunset that. But JP Morgan Chase, Fifth Third Bank, Bank of America to a certain extent. And then, of course, Fannie, Freddie, et cetera. And more recently, we've actually had the Players Association, which is a professional athlete association that is very interested in how this form of family ownership is a barrier to people. So it's been really fascinating to see how many folks are entering the space, and I feel like there's room for more. So I'll pause there.
All right. Before I move on to talking about the program, I do want to invite people that if you have questions as we're going along, feel free to drop those in the chat for when we get to the Q&A section. Because we want to make sure that while it's fresh in your brain, you go ahead and get it out, and we can work through those after. So, I'm going to talk about the program, and I'm also going to talk about some of the pilots that we have to make our program more accessible. So, I'll just say as a sort of broad overview, the Family Forest Carbon Program started in 2020 in just a few counties of Pennsylvania. It was sort of a pilot idea that some of our team members had, and it was successful in those few counties, and now we have rapidly expanded to the point that we're available in 20 states in less than 5 years. So it's a, or maybe about 5 years. So it's a tremendous level of growth. We have a program specifically for landowners who have forest land already called IFM. And so this slide here talks about one of our IFM practices. Depending on the state that a landowner lives in, the name of their IFM practice might be a little different. This growing mature forest one speaks to our IFM practice that's available in what we call the Central Appalachians down through the southern, through the traditional sort of southern region. So what does this look like for landowners? Basically, for landowners who have mature harvestable timber, they will enter into a 20-year contract with us, where for that period of time, we're asking them not to clear cut. So not to cut out all the trees and not to high grade. So not to take just most all of the valuable trees and sort of leave the rest. This is helping landowners to get to more of the sustainable management. So I talked earlier about how for some landowners they don't have healthy forests, and so that makes it so that their forest is not as high value, and they're not able to get as much money for that in the event that they do a harvest for the forest market. So our program helps landowners to have more sustainable management and get to a higher value woodland by the time they get to the end of that 20-year period. For this, we have a 30-acre minimum. And so landowners who have at least 30 acres are able to, join our program. We put basically a harvest restriction on the property. Um, Nothing changes in terms of the landowner's ownership. They still fully own the property. They're still able to access it for, any recreational purposes that they have, hunting, fishing, those kinds of things. But we have access to the carbon rights and are using those to work with businesses within the voluntary carbon market who want to sort of lower their carbon footprint. They have maybe net zero goals that they have for their organization or whatever, and those proceeds help us to be able to compensate landowners for that more sustainable practice. It says here in parentheses, we lower our acreage limit to 15 acres for extra small landowners. So I mentioned that Don is in our extra small landowner pilot, and so he can talk about his experience in a moment. But for landowners in certain, aspects of the population, veterans, for example, or living in high poverty community or some other indicators, we're lowering that limit so that landowners within 15 to 29 acres are able to enroll in the program. And because of that, we have a 20% payment premium because we know that for us, the amount of payment that they get is based on their acreage. And so for landowners who have smaller acreage, that's a smaller payment. So we do have a 20% payment premium for those landowners. Um, Again, this has to be merchantable timber. So that's why it talks about this minimum, amount of merchantable timber for the program. This does focus on naturally regenerating forests, so it does not lend itself to plantations. And this is for, specific types of hardwoods. There is sustainable harvesting allowed, meaning that landowners can do thinnings, and there's just some specifications around the thinnings that they can do. And landowners do get a forest management plan as a part of their participation, which is updated every 10 to 20 years, depending on their state and what's the norm in their region. And so if landowners want just like a basic plan that we have as one of our sort of template plans, it's fully included at no cost to the landowner, just as a part of their enrollment in our program. If they want a more complex plan to access NRCS programs, for example, we have a stipend towards the cost of a forest management plan that they can get with a consulting forester as opposed to one of our staff foresters. And landowners do have a personal use allowance, so they're able to use some of the wood for like firewood or other personal uses with the certain amount that they're allowed to do over that. You can advance. Okay, so some of the benefits, there's the financial benefits. So landowners do get an annual payment every year that they're enrolled in a program. Within 60 days of them signing the contract and doing everything that allows us to sort of issue that first payment, landowners will get their first payment, and then on or around the anniversary of their first payment each year, they'll get another annual payment, and they'll continue to get that throughout the 20-year contract period. So it gives landowners some peace of mind. Thinking back to again those property taxes, that was a barrier for landowners. Having this guaranteed income every year, so the land is not necessarily costing them money to stay in the to keep the land in their family. That's an incentive for landowners. Again, making sure that their woodland is healthier and more climate resistant to have more of that long-term value. So the idea is that throughout their participation in the program, the woodland that they came in with, um, what they leave out with will be more healthy and will be able to yield a higher economic benefit for them should they decide to do a more robust harvest post-enrollment. Um, so to have more of a sort of financial benefit for that woodland. So we're sort of make sure they have a financial benefit to get them to tide them over until you get to the end of the program where you have this healthier woodland that you're able to then have a more economic benefit from that should you decide to do a more robust harvest at the end. And again, landowners have the still maintain the ownership and privacy over their land. We would never go on a landowner's property without them knowing that we were coming to for any reason. So we're not just showing up, you know, yeah. So yes, landowners do get that forest management plan. They also have access to a forester. So we have staff foresters that work on our team, or we also have a network of consulting foresters in various states. So every landowner who enrolls in the program has access to a forester and forest knowledge, um, so that they are able to, get that forest management plan to help them to really spell out what are their goals for their property. And each landowner is just naming what do they want to do with their property, and the foresters is working with them to help make sure that or help to just kind of discuss and know that their participation in this program is in alignment with their goals for their land. So it's customized to what their needs are. Landowners have access then to forest stewardship and just long-term planning for their land and help them meet other goals that they might have. If it not be economic goals, maybe they want to make sure that they have a good habitat for different wildlife in their community, have increased soil and water quality, or other goals that they might have for their land that this program would support. So that's our improved forest management practice. We also have a fields and forest practice, which is afforestation. What does that mean? Planting trees. So for landowners who don't already have a forest, but they would like to have a forest, that's what the fields and forest practice is. So with this, the minimum acreage is still 30. We don't have the extra small program for fields and forests. However, if there were landowners who were below 30 acres, if there was another landowner who was also below 30 acres within a 5 mile radius, then we could still enroll them because there's somebody else close by that will make it, you know, uh, feasible for an operator to come out and do the work on their land. So this is looking at marginal row crop or pasture that they're wanting to convert into loblolly pine. It must have been unforested for the last 10 years. That's just a requirement that is of the verifier who verifies our carbon credits. These are 30-year contracts, so it's longer than the contract for the improved forest management practices. During that time, landowners can still do sustainable harvests such as a thinnings. They can do two thinnings at certain points in the contract period. They do still get that same forest management plan that you would get with the other practice. Um, and for this, all of the site prep is paid for, all of the seedlings are paid for, the planting is all done and arranged by our team. And then landowners do still get a financial benefit. So they're getting 30 acres, $30 per acre per year. And they're keeping any revenue from those thinning harvests that they might do, or from if they were to do a clear cut at the end of their 30-year contract period, all of that revenue stays with the landowner. So it's really a low burden, low cost of entry for the landowner, and they're able to make their property a working forest if that's something that they're interested in doing. You can go on. So where are we operating? I mentioned that our program is available in 20 states. So this map on the left shows all of the areas that we're in. So we've got some Midwest, Southern, Northeast, sort of Central Appalachians. That's this area here. If you can see. Oh wait, no, I'm not sharing my screen. I was moving my little mouse around. But that's sort of above the traditional Southern region and below the Northeast region is that Central Appalachians area. The image on the right, you'll see shows where both the fields and forests and IFM growing mature forest practice are available because not every practice is available in all states. So in the sort of Midwestern states and Northeastern states, you'll only see that practice that's available for landowners who already have forest land. When we get into some of the southern states, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida, that's where you'll see that afforestation fields and forest practice available. So for some landowners, they might be in a county or in a state that has both practices, and they might have both forest land and non-forest land, and they could potentially enroll in both practices. So how would a landowner get started? Just going to our website. I always recommend landowners just go to familyforestkarma.org, map out your property. It'll let you know, is this property potentially eligible for our program? If it is, they can set up a call with somebody from our contact center who will call them and talk through more information about if they might be eligible to participate in the program. If after that call they're eligible, it sounds like it might be a good fit for the landowner. They will be assigned a forester so they could talk with that forester to talk more about their eligibility and plan out sort of the project and what part of their property they might be able to enroll should they want to do that. After that, they would be offered a contract, or they would be given an offer that would say like this is how much your contract amount would be, sort of the terms of that agreement or whatever that landowner could review. If they wanted to accept the offer, then they would be issued a contract that they could then sign. Sometime after the signing, a landowner sort of does the due diligence of what's needed to finalize the details of what we would need to issue that first payment. They would get that payment. They could go ahead with getting their forest management plan, which will happen within the first 2 years of their enrollment, unless a landowner already has a forest management plan, in which case it would happen when their forest management plan expires. And so they would also have access to a team that we call community sustained engagement, who is there as a resource and support system for landowners throughout the enrollment of their property. And they also continue to have access to their forester as well. And another thing I just want to say for landowners, again, why I always recommend that they just go to the website and map it. Even if they're not, if it looks like we're not in a county that overlaps with them or something like that, or they're not sure, I still recommend that they go ahead and do that because we're always rapidly expanding. Like I said, we started out in a few counties in Pennsylvania and now we're in 20 states. So even if we're not in your county right now, we might be in your county very soon, or we might be in your state very soon. And if you're already in our system and have already mapped that out, you'll be the first to learn when we come to your area, when we have something that's eligible for you, that you might be eligible for. You can go on. So I'm gonna pass it over to Don, and I'm gonna ask Don if you could please just share with us about your experience with the Family First Carbon Program. How did you learn about the program, and how does this sort of fit in with what your goals are for your land?
Well, as far as how I found out about it, was through a Facebook post, um, and I decided, well, you know, let's see what it's about. And at first, I was, sent a message back saying that my property didn't qualify, which I thought, well, I've got 37 acres. It says if you have 30 acres or more. So I actually got in touch with Leslie Webb, and we discussed it. And I guess my home address, my property is in three tracts. I have a 3.6 acre tract, a 16 point some odd acre tract, and a 17-acre tract. They all adjoin, but my home address shows just the 3.6 acre tract. So that's what they were going off of. So when we added, she added up all the other acreage that I had, then I did qualify. Um, it's it was a very simple process. I was quite surprised. I've even got a friend of mine involved. He has a lot more acreage than what I have, and he's in the process of sealing the deal right now. He's already I think already talked to the forester and everything, but he's got a couple hundred acres, so he's going to benefit from it greatly. Neither one of us have any plans to timber. The only timbering that I've done, as you can see around my house, I have quite a bit cleared around my house. That was due to a big tree falling and almost hitting the house. I decided, to solve that problem by cutting all the timber. And I had some veneer grade red oaks right up close to my house. So, we benefited just from an eight. I think we harvested about 8 acres total. And, um, you know, it was well worth, the time, because not only did I get, the trees cleared around my house, I've got well, I guess it depends on how you look at it. I've got a lot of grass to mow now, but um, it was a very simple process. Leslie Webb, walked me through all of it and was very, 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 helpful.
Well, I'm glad that you had an easy experience, and I'm glad that you're making referrals because we love when landowners have a good experience that makes them want to share it with their friends. And Leslie's on my team, so we appreciate the shout out links. Leslie's on the call, so I'm sure she appreciates the shout out. Thank you, Don. Um, okay, well, let's move into the Q&A. We have a lot of good questions here that I see coming in. Should I go ahead and just work through these, or is somebody gonna, like, do you want me to read them out loud, or is somebody gonna read these out loud? Let me, okay, I'll just go through them. So let's see. Um, there was a question that came in, how can I get added to the network of consulting foresters? So on our website, if you go to familyforestcarbonpark.org, there's a section that says for foresters, and you can just go through there, and there's a whole space on just how to get linked in as a consulting forester. I'll also say anytime if a landowner is already working with a forester, they can continue working with their forester that they already have. We would just, um, work to get that particular forester trained and knowledgeable about our program. So they would be sort of, within the network of our consulting foresters. So sometimes foresters come in from just learning about our program, and other times they come in because they're already working with a landowner who's interested in our program. Um, I see a question about can you cancel your contract before the 20 years is up? You can. I would not recommend it, but you can. So
Yeah, I read the fine
when
print.
yeah, it may be, actually, Don, I'm going to come to you right after this. I'm going to come to you because I think there was a question that came in before the webinar, and I'm going to connect that to this one. But whenever I'm talking to landowners about whether or not they might want to do this, I always tell landowners, you know, talk to your whole family, whoever's going to inherit the property from you. Have a whole family sort of conversation and really think about it, sit with it. We have a network of pro bono attorneys that can work with landowners to review the contract and make sure it's something they really want to do before they sign that contract. So just making sure that it really fits with not just their own intentions, but also the intention of their heirs before they sign that contract. Because it is a big commitment, and you can sort of cancel your contract, but there's a penalty to do so. So the funds that would have been paid to the landowner, those would then be due back, as well as a penalty for the cost that we sort of incurred with the administration of that landowner's enrollment. So it is possible, but I really encourage landowners to be sure. Sometimes things come up. But I really encourage landowners to talk to their families and be sure before they enter into the contract. If it's not a good fit, don't proceed. Um, And then I also just want to say too, sometimes landowners have things that happen that are outside of their control. So maybe their property gets destroyed by a hurricane or something like that. If that were to happen, it would be considered an unintended reversal, and so a contract would be terminated, but the landowner would not incur any penalty. The penalty is only if a landowner is just choosing to opt out, or if they're selling the property and the next owner or something like that doesn't want to participate, something like that. That it's an optional thing that led to their lack of enrollment. But there was a question that came in before the webinar that asked something to the effect of to you, Don, what was your thought process? You're retired, so I don't know your age, but thinking about that 20-year commitment, how did you think through that, and what did that mean for your, particular family situation? And did you have any sort of hesitation around that time frame?
No, I mean, um, my wife is quite a bit younger than me, so uh, if I don't uh, make it to the end of the 20 years, I'm sure she'll still be here to for 20 years or more. So, and then I have two sons that one of them still lives here, so uh, he's actually I think has plans to build a house on the property, so he'll be here as well.
Okay. Um, I'm glad you mentioned the building a house thing, because another question that landowners commonly ask is, if I'm planning to build a house or something in the future, what does that mean for my enrollment? And they can just talk to the forester about that and exclude, whatever little portion of the property they might be planning on doing that. So I'm glad
Yeah,
you
I
brought that up.
mean
But
there are
yeah,
areas of the property that didn't meet the requirements for the, I guess, you as far as mature hardwoods. Um, so they weren't included in the property that I got, I received payment for. And I asked Leslie, does that mean that these portions of the property that are excluded, I can still do whatever I want to with? She said, of course. So since part of my property is not included in what I was paid for, I still can do whatever I want with those portions of the property.
correct. Yes. And I looked at your profile, and I think there's 25 acre. I think you said you have
26 or
37.
26 point some
And
odd acres. Yeah.
25 or 26 was enrolled.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we sort of calculate based on the eligible acres. And so yeah, that's why you fell into that sort of 15 to 29 acreage allocation. But yeah, and so for landowners who have adjoining parcels like yours, because I think you said you had three adjoining parcels, you're able to sort of allocate those collectively, but based on how much of it is eligible and how much of it a landowner is planning to enroll, sort of gets to, the final of what's actually included in the project. Okay, so I see a question that's for the Fields and Forest program, is longleaf pine allowed species for afforestation? Fields and Forest is only loblolly. There's been a lot of conversation on the team about trying to see if there might be something that might be feasible with longleaf. There's not as much carbon data available, and our program really looks a lot at the data and like the carbon benefit, and it's very scientifically robust in a way that sets us apart from other programs. So we really like to make sure that a practice makes sense, scientifically from a carbon perspective. So that's why we haven't quite broached into the longleaf area yet. So fields and forests, it's just loblolly, but there could potentially be a longleaf practice that comes available sometime in the future. Um, Darlene asked, this is the only program available in Florida. I think that's referring to Fields and Forests. So Fields and Forests is the only practice available in Florida. We don't have an IFM practice, meaning a practice that's for landowners who already have forests yet in Florida. We will, but right now it's just Fields and Forests. Again, we're always expanding. Okay. Let's see. Questions. Okay, Rebecca, did I understand correctly that if I've mapped my land and I received a message that it doesn't qualify currently, parentheses, established forest in Florida, I am in the system and will receive notification when the carbon program comes to Florida? Yes. Yes, you heard that correctly. So we do reach out to landowners in our system once we have something that they're eligible for. Actually, that was kind of Don's situation, because you thought you maybe wouldn't have enough to qualify, and then we reached back out and was like, actually, we have this special, pilot program, and he was able to enroll. But Yes. So we reach out to landowners once we do come into the area with something that we have available for them, even if we didn't have something originally. Okay. Let's just see. Okay. Oh, I think that's the same question. Wait. Okay, for Mavis. What are the environmental and economic impacts of smaller properties?
What are the environmental and economic say it again? I missed
It
one word.
says, what are the environmental and economic impacts of smaller properties? I'm not,
When it's owned as heirs property. Well, I'll say this, what I've learned with the Sustainable Forestry and African American Land Retention Program, which is a very, or network, is it a very bespoke landowner program in which they're working with landowners with unique issues, in particular small parcels. And what they've learned is that, or what we learned through that is that a lot of um, a lot of landowners simply can't compete with larger landowners when it comes to vendor services, when it comes to like actual, whether it's doing a land survey or, um, practices, it's hard to get those services because you're often, your parcel's so small. So when that happens, then, you have an issue with undermanagement. I think also you don't have the same capabilities when you have a smaller parcel and are competing with larger landowners. You don't necessarily have the capabilities to have a more comprehensive plan suitable for your property. So I'm not saying that smaller properties are shouldn't be addressed. What I am saying is that we have to be really creative and intentional with how we work with smaller parcel owners because they just need a different set of circumstances.
thank you, Mavis. Okay,
If I
let's
may throw
see.
out there, Todd, sorry, I will say that there are some areas in North Carolina, for example, where you have a lot of properties owned that are small. And when you have a lot of small parcels owned in that way in one area, the impacts go beyond the actual parcel. It becomes an issue for all of us. And so that's what I love about the AFF carbon program, particularly because you are baking into the model the technical assistance that the landowners need to participate. That's technical assistance that they often aren't able to get on their own without, substantial resources.
Yeah, and that's also contributes to our approach of really looking at things at a landscape scale as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
just one particular
Mm-hmm.
property. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see. I see a question that says, I live in Indiana. Am I eligible for FFCP? We're not currently in Indiana. So not today, but I would say I promise that in the future there will be something available in Indiana that you could at least look and see if your property aligned with what comes available. But today we're not open in Indiana. Is payment only tied to a dollar amount and the number of acreage opposed to dollar amount and the number of carbon credits? Good question. So yes, it's only about we don't like measure the specific carbon generated on a particular property. So that actually relates to just what I was just saying. It's all at a landscape scale. And so all of the landowners in a cohort together are sort of generating together. So we wouldn't be able to say like you generated a certain amount on your property. We just pay a flat like for the management change. You've changed your management and so we're paying you based on what the prescription that you're participating in as opposed to um number of carbon credits. Which one particular land would like property would also not really be enough that it would generate like a credit. It would have to be an accumulation of landowners together. Okay, another question for Dawn. What are some of the key things you considered when enrolling in the program, and were there other programs that you were considering?
Um, no, there weren't any other programs that I looked at. Um, but as far as what I considered is, you know, my my property, I have no plans, had no desire actually to timber to harvest any more timber off of it other than what I already had. Um, I like it for the aesthetic benefits, and um, most of what I have is oak hardwoods, which I think I've got a slide there showing that the deer and the turkeys love the acorns and this year the chestnut oak is really producing. Um, you know, there are areas around on the property here down the ridge area that the ground is just covered with chestnut acorns, which are highly sought after by the deer, the turkeys, and we have the occasional bear that comes through as well.
All right. Thank you for answering that question. Okay, another question. Is there any obligation after getting the offer or any cost? No, there is no obligation. If you get an offer, you don't like it, you don't have to sign the contract. That's sort of it. And there's no cost to the landowner at any point. One of the things that also distinguishes us as a program is that we really take on all of the administration operating costs associated with the program. So we are paying landowners as much as we possibly can, and it doesn't cost them anything financially to participate, or to just go through the funnel to see if they want to participate. We don't, there's no cost. Okay. Can a landowner participate if they're also participating in a state conservation program? Most likely, yes. So the landowner would want to talk to whatever forester that they've been assigned to, just talk through what program that they might be enrolled in. Our foresters have done a lot of robust outreach and talking to different state foresters and conservation programs about the program to make sure that it's to see which programs it sort of fits with and doesn't fit with. But that's something that a forester would always want to review. If you already have a forest management plan, they want to review that and see if it, coincides with the program and if it's a good fit. But most often, the landowner is able to do both. The only thing a landowner, like if there's something that's already limiting harvesting, that's going to be a situation where they probably would not be able to do both because it wouldn't be an additional benefit. It's like double dipping, just to say that you're already to get compensated for something that you're already doing. But if it's not a harvest restriction conservation program, you can most likely do both. Okay. All right. Is there any program for parcels under 15 acres? Not really. So the extra small for IFM is limited to 15 acres for landowners who already have forests. The reason for that is that foresters were telling us that 15 acres is pretty much the smallest that they would do a forest management plan for. So that's like the smallest harvestable area. The only way that a landowner might be able to do it if they had less than 15 acres is for fields and forests. When I was talking about how if there's multiple landowners that are under 30 within 5 miles of each other and wanted to all participate together, then let's say maybe there's three that have 10, 10, and 10. That might be a situation where a landowner for fields and forests, specifically for the tree planting practice, might be able to have under 15. So that's all the questions that I see, which is great because I don't see any additional questions coming in, and that's time. Thanks everybody for coming. Um, we will, I think, try to compile all of the questions and maybe send out the answers, I think, maybe to the attendees, like a Q&A document. We'll send the recording. We'll send the recording so people will have that. And uh, feel free to reach out to the organizers, and if you want anyone's contact information, so you can reach out if you have additional questions, if you want to talk through your particular situation. I also just want to say it in one closing. Mavis talked a lot about heirs property. We do have a program available for landowners who have heirs property that if they still want to participate in our program, we have some resources available to support helping them get to clear title if they want to still participate in the Family Forest Garden program and they are an heirs property owner. I know that one of the lawyers that I've talked to about supporting landowners through that heirs property pilot is on the call, so thank you for coming. Um, so yeah, just if you're interested in that, please reach out to like the organizers that got your confirmation or whatever, or maybe when we send out the recording, we'll just include my contact information in there as well. So if landowners want to talk about the heirs property pilot, if you are an heirs property owner, we can talk about that one-on-one. Thanks everybody.
Thank
Thanks
you,
Don. Thanks
Kathleen.
Mavis.